Hi everybody, it's Ashley. Welcome back to my channel, and today I thought I would do a fun video which is reacting to unpopular opinions about Harry Potter. Harry Potter is my all-time favorite book series. I've fell in love with them as a kid, and every passing year I love them more and more. And the community is quite large, as I'm sure all of you know, and that means that there have been tons of opinions formed over the years about conspiracies and different plots, and I thought it would be interesting to take a look at some of the most unpopular opinions and seeing whether or not I agree with them. I have not read this yet, but I found this article on BuzzFeed, which is 23 unpopular Harry Potter opinions that'll have you looking at the entire series in a new light. And I'm really excited to see what this has to offer. So let's continue on. Number 1, Neville should have been the chosen one. Neville is better than Harry. Neville is more caring, courageous, and dependable. Harry did a lot of the legwork because he was labeled the chosen one, but Neville was the one who destroyed the final Horcrux in the end, allowing Voldemort to be killed. I can see where people get this theory from, and I do love Neville as a character. Neville was amazing, super, super sweet. I adore him. I don't think that he would have held up very well to being the chosen one, though. He didn't have the self-esteem. He didn't have enough belief in himself. He didn't really have any drive until after the DA was formed, and that helped boost his confidence and helped a lot. As part of Dumbledore's army, absolutely. I agree that he came into his own, and he did very well there. But I don't believe he would have done well as the chosen one. It would have been a very, very different ending, in my opinion. Number 2, Fred and George are overrated. I never cared for Fred and George. I know fans loved them for their jokes, tricks, and wittiness, and they were devastated when Fred died, but I just didn't have any attachment to them. You guys are going to hate me. I totally agree with this. I love Fred and George. I do. But I don't see why they are as well loved as they are. In certain stories, I felt like their silliness and over-the-top practical jokes took away from the story. And in other ones, I felt like it was just what everybody needed. In the beginning, I felt like it was overboard when they were younger, the first couple of books. And later on, I felt like it was a needed change and was, for lack of a better phrase, it was the light to the darkness. It brought an easiness after the war started and gave people a reason to laugh. So like in that instance, I do believe that, they played a purpose in that part. And of course it was devastating when Fred died, but I just didn't see the attachment to the twins as I did other characters in the series, and there were times when they really got on my nerves. Okay, number 3, Hermione should have ended up with Viktor Krum. Hermione should not have been with Ron or Harry. If she had to end up with anyone, I actually only ever liked her being with Viktor Krum, the hot and chivalrous foreign athlete who appreciated her right from the start. Yes and no. I do believe that Viktor Krum was critical in us seeing the Hermione that we know and love and fell in love with, the more confident, more laid back Hermione of the later part of the series. I don't think that would have happened had she not met Krum. But I just don't see them working as an overall couple. I really do feel like she should have ended up with Harry. I didn't like her with Ron either. They just fought way too much. But no, I don't think as a long-term couple in the end she would have worked with Krum. 4, Hermione should have ended up with Malfoy. I think that Malfoy and Hermione fought so much because of all the tension between them. Yes, Malfoy said some really mean things to her, but that's because that's what his parents told him. You believe that your parents say when you're young, and you don't really form your own independent opinions until you're older. Malfoy and Hermione are like-minded people who are intelligent and enjoy the same things. He would have appreciated a strong and ambitious woman like Hermione, unlike Ron. I really think that Malfoy and Hermione would have been a good fit together. Hell no. I will be the first to admit that Draco Malfoy definitely redeemed himself in the end. But no, absolutely not. I don't really understand where this opinion comes from. I have heard it before. But I don't understand where people are coming from. There was never really any kind of a bond between Hermione and Malfoy to suggest that this would ever be something that would cross either of their minds. And I just don't see it working. Yes, he wasn't the bad guy that he appeared to be in the beginning of the series. Totally agree with that. That doesn't mean that he should have ended up with Hermione. That's just my personal opinion. Number 5, Harry and Ginny should have named their child something else. Using the names of Albus Dumbledore, the world's most manipulative wizard, and Severus Snape, an abusive teacher who wanted to hook up with Harry's mom, was a mistake, especially when there were better wizards who actually helped Harry to name them after, like Arthur Weasley, Remus Lupin, Alastor Moody, Neville Longbottom, Aberforth Dumbledore, etc. Honoring 2 men who weren't all that great kind of disrespects the good men who actively tried to make Harry's life better and easier. I partially agree with this. I understand completely why Harry would want to name his child after Dumbledore. Dumbledore was a very, very important figure to him growing up. And yes, he had flaws, and he definitely did things in a way that he probably shouldn't have done. But he did believe he was doing the right thing 100%, and Harry knows that. So I can see why he would want to name him after him. Snape, on the other hand. No, absolutely not. This man was abusive. He was absolutely horrid, not only to Harry, but to all of his students that were not in Slytherin. And just because he was working as a double agent and protected Harry in the end does not erase all that happened. I'm sorry, it doesn't. Yes, it was tragic that he loved Lily Potter and she died and he wanted to protect her son. Even though looking at him brought out this hatred because of Harry's father. It just does not excuse the behavior. I could halfway understand it if it was only Harry, but he was like that with all of his students. He had no business being a teacher. Absolutely none. And for Harry to name his child after him, I just did not find that believable in the least. Let's see. 6. Half-Blood Prince is the worst in the series. Specifically, the main plot about Harry trying to procure Slughorn's full memory about Tom Riddle's Horcrux questions. Dumbledore already knew all about Horcruxes, so the only thing we gained was that Voldemort created 7 of them. I do not agree with this at all. Half-Blood Prince is one of my favorite books of the series. It answered so many questions that we'd had from the very beginning, and it set up the epic finale that we had in Deathly Hallows. Yes, Slughorn could be annoying, and that could be dragged out a little bit, but I don't think this person actually understood what the story actually was about. Yes, Dumbledore knew about the Horcruxes, but we learned about the Horcruxes through Harry's eyes, not through Dumbledore's eyes, through Harry's eyes. And of course we're going to learn about that gradually, and we did figured out. We didn't figure out where they were, obviously. That's the whole plot line of Deathly Hallows. But we definitely knew what they were. 7. Hufflepuff is the best house. Gryffindors can have huge egos and be foolhardy. Ravenclaws can be know-it-all assholes, and Slytherins can be dishonest and conniving. But the vast majority of Hufflepuffs are kind, smart, and extremely capable, and don't boast about it at all. They are just low-key great people who, mind you, never swayed to the dark arts. I never understood why everyone thinks so little of them. I don't know if I would necessarily say that it's the best house. I don't think we really had enough information about Hufflepuff to be able to say that with 100% honesty. Just, you know, like, we didn't really have any main characters in Hufflepuff like we did the other houses. We had a few side characters here and there, but we didn't really know enough about the house itself. I think the biggest Hufflepuff character that we had was Cedric Diggory, and he was really only there for one book. So they definitely have good qualities. And actually on Pottermore, I was sorted into Hufflepuff, but I'm not attached to that house like I am the others, just because there wasn't as much setup in it. Like, we had characters in Ravenclaw that became super important, and like, of course, we got to see into the Slytherin side of things with Malfoy and Crabbe and Goyle, even though they were jerks. But, you know, Hufflepuff, we didn't have a lot of big characters to like really get any insight. And I could be wrong, but I think that that's the only common room that Harry was never in. I might be wrong about that, but I believe that that is the truth. Number 8. Gryffindor and Slytherin aren't all that different. The Gryffindor and Slytherin houses are basically the same. They're two sides of the same coin. People need to give Slytherins more credit. They're not all brooding, psychopathic wizards. I do agree with this. They have a lot of the same qualities, Gryffindors and Slytherins do. But the way that they deal with situations is different. And I really, really liked it. I've always thought that way, even from the beginning, reading the series for the very first time, that there were so many similarities personality-wise, but the way things were handled were different. Gryffindors are more apt to think and go into situations with a level head. Not all, but, you know, as a whole. Slytherin, on the other hand, seems to go more on rash hatred rather than thinking things through. Number 9. Luna Lovegood is the best character. She is unique, understanding, selfless, fights for her friends, and is kind to everyone, no matter what, despite all she's been through. I love Luna. She is so sweet, so unique, and absolutely adorable with her weirdness. I love her. I think she's a great role model for girls, that you don't have to fit into this box of what everybody expects you to be. You can be your own person. You can have your own beliefs, and you don't have to hide behind it. And I absolutely love her for that. I just wish that she had been introduced into the series a little bit earlier. Number 10. Draco Malfoy deserved better. Malfoy deserved a redemption arc far more than Snape did. Yes, he was a bit of a douche, but that was because he was influenced by his parents, who were terrible. He was forced into joining Voldemort's side and becoming a Death Eater, along with plenty of other Slytherins. You can see his true nature in later films. He's just a scared boy who doesn't have much say in what he can and cannot do. The only reason Harry and Malfoy hated each other was because of their initial meeting in the Sorcerer's Stone. Had that not occurred, I believe they could have been pretty good friends. I do agree with this. 100%. I am in the camp of people that when we first met Draco Malfoy, I absolutely hated him. And you're supposed to. especially if you're reading the series for the first time at the age that the characters were, which was 11. But as I got older, I started seeing things way differently. He grew up in a house and from a bloodline of Death Eaters and people who just like really crammed the pure blood ideology down your throat. And his father in particular is just thinks he's Voldemort's right-hand man, and he's gonna be pushing that down on his son his entire life. So he hears all of these things, but when it comes right down to it, he doesn't really believe them. He's just following what he was always taught. And as far as the whole he and Harry probably would have been friends thing, I don't necessarily think that is true, because their personalities were too different. But I do believe they wouldn't have hated each other as much as they did. I believe that the biggest reason that they ended up becoming enemies was because Draco's pride was hurt. That Harry didn't want to be friends with him right off the bat because he saw the way that he treated the Weasleys. Had that not happened, they probably would have been fine acquaintances without having an opinion towards each other one way or the other. Number 11, Albus Dumbledore wasn't all that great. Dumbledore was manipulative. He didn't care about anyone but himself. He used Harry and everyone else around him and didn't care how he accomplished his goals because the ends always justified the means, like how he left Harry to suffer with the Dursleys rather than with anyone in the wizarding world for the greater good. He kept very important information from Harry, which left Harry struggling to find out everything on his own after Dumbledore died. He was a jerk, and I hate how people still idolize him. Whew. I have strong opinions here. I can see how, in some ways, Dumbledore would come off as manipulative. He did have a way of twisting things and having people do what he wanted, but he always did it for a greater purpose. And it was all because he wanted the world to be a better place and ultimately take down Voldemort, because he knew that he wasn't really gone in the beginning of the series, and he always had to be prepared for the possibility that he was going to come back. And everybody else, at least the vast majority of people, believed that he was gone, so everybody was careless and they were reckless, but Dumbledore wasn't. And especially when Harry came to school, like, he knew he had to be protective of him, because he knew that at that point, with Harry being reintroduced into that world, that Voldemort was going to come out of hiding, and he did. So I understand why some people think he's manipulative, and I don't think he went about everything in the right way, but I do believe he had good intentions. I don't believe he was selfish at all. And as far as leaving him to suffer with the Dursleys, yes, the Dursleys were horrible and they were abusive, but had Harry grown up in that world, he probably would have died as an infant. Or, he would have been targeted forever. Being with the Dursleys, and he still had his mother's protection, and it was explained so many times why this was necessary. I just don't see why this person is saying that he was selfish for doing that. Like, he wouldn't have had the same protection with anybody from the wizarding world. And he would have been targeted much earlier before he was able to protect himself. That's why Dumbledore did it. But I could go on forever about that one, so I'm just going to go on. Number 12, Severus Snape also wasn't all that great. Snape was a horrible, horrible human being, just plain awful. I understand that Snape went through a lot of pain when he lost Lily, the love of his life, but everyone goes through hardships. That's life. Snape didn't deal with his pain in a healthy way. He was verbally and physically abusive to his students. He was, simply put, a huge bully. There were a lot of people who suffered in this series who didn't end up awful. Yes, I agree 100%. I touched on that earlier in another question, so I won't go into it too much. But I completely understand that he was in pain over losing Lily, and that caused him to be hardened in a way, but there's absolutely no reason for him to be so abusive towards his students. And even if he was standoffish with Harry because he looked too much like his dad or whatever, it still isn't license for treating him the way that he did. Number 13. Actually, Harry isn't all that great either. As much as I love the series and everybody in it, Harry Potter kinda sucks as a character. He's selfish, only complains about his own problems, and low-key enjoys feeling like the world is against him to justify being a dish to people who care about him. For example, the majority of the plot of Order of the Phoenix was Harry being awful to his friends when all they were trying to do was help. Yes, I love Harry anyway, but he's quite annoying if you really think about it. I don't agree with this. Yes, Harry had some issues. He's a flawed character. He was a teenager throughout the entire series. All of the responsibility that was put on his shoulders, any teenager would have crushed under that. Finding out, one, when you're 11 years old, that your parents were killed by an evil sorcerer that wants you dead because he sees you as his rival, and then finding out later that it's literally prophesized in the cards that you have to kill him to save the world. That is a lot of responsibility for a child, for a teenager. And yes, he's going to act out against it because he just wants to be normal. Who wouldn't? And the situation that they're talking about with Order of the Phoenix, at the end of Goblet of Fire, he literally watched somebody be murdered right in front of him. He witnessed Voldemort's resurrection. He was harmed physically. He found out that a confidant that he trusted was an imposter for a year, the person that he trusted heartily. Even though it was never diagnosed, he was obviously suffering from PTSD as a 15-year-old, untreated, and nobody was really addressing that. Everybody's just like, oh, Harry, you need to calm down. Nobody really seemed to care what he had gone through the year before. So I believe that angst is completely justified. And I'll admit, when I was younger and I read the books for the first time, that irritated me. I'm like, oh my God, grow up. But looking at it now from an adult standpoint, I'm like, this kid was suffering and nobody was helping him. So I think it's completely understandable. Number 14, Harry didn't know how to take care of pets. Harry was an awful pet owner. He kept Hedwig locked up, yelled at her all the time, and tossed her around all the time due to his recklessness. Justice for Hedwig. When did he yell at her? I honestly do not remember that. He had to keep her locked up at the Dursleys. That was his uncle, because his uncle was so scared that he was going to send messages to his freaky little friends, as he put it, and he wouldn't let her out of the cage. That's not on Harry. And she was not locked up when they were in the Wizarding World and at Hogwarts. She was in the owlry with all the other owls, so that's completely false. I'm sorry. It is. Number 15. The first 4 movies didn't do the books justice, especially Prisoner of Azkaban. They barely mentioned Moony, Wormtail, Patfoot, and Prongs, who are what made Prisoner of Azkaban one of the best books. Even though Goblet of Fire was a bit better, they glossed over the whole Barty Crouch storyline, which was extremely important. If I hadn't read the books, I wouldn't have understood who he was at all. I agree with Goblet of Fire. 100%. Barty Crouch was glossed over. There was not enough time devoted to who he was, and if I hadn't read the books, I would have been confused. So I do agree with that, and I do think that the director on Prisoner of Azkaban took a lot of liberties stylistically, but the major plot points were there, and I thought that the first 2 movies were very good adaptations, so I'm not really sure why it's saying the first 4. Because if anything, I thought that it got further away from the story later in the movies. I thought the first one stuck to it pretty good, up until about Goblet of Fire. 16. Harry deserved his detentions in Order of the Phoenix, but not the abusive punishment. While Umbridge was the despicable human and her abuse of children was reprehensible, Harry deserved every detention he was given in Order of the Phoenix. He mouthed off in class, even after being warned time and again by teachers and friends that he was only hurting his cause. Yes, her teaching was trash, and she was a horrible person. She was the teacher, and in her classroom, she was the boss. No. There is absolutely no excuse for her behavior. Detention is one thing, but detention for asking legitimate questions is not okay. She didn't want to answer questions, so she would just give him detention. And especially in the manner that she did it, absolutely not. It is not okay. That is never okay from a teacher. I'm sorry. No. Absolutely 100% no. Harry brought attention to the fact that Voldemort returned, and the Ministry didn't want to acknowledge that, and of course she was there on the Ministry's orders, so she's going to want to keep that hushed up. But him asking legitimate questions, he only blew up because she blew off his questions and would give him detention for asking legitimate questions, and yeah, then he would start to mouth off. But again, he was very, very traumatized from the previous year, and not having anybody believe you has to be very, very discouraging for him. And, she could have simply talked to him after class. The way things that were handled was completely inappropriate. Number 17. Harry and Ginny's relationship wasn't believable. We never got any romantic tension between Harry and Ginny. The movies seemed to rely on the hope that the people who were watching the movies had also read the books and would be able to fill in the gaps themselves. Yes, I had always said this. Harry and Ginny did not make any sense together. I love Ginny. I love all of the Weasleys. They are the perfect surrogate family for Harry, but I honestly felt like the only reason for the Harry-Ginny union in the end was to make him a member of the Weasleys, an official member of the Weasley home, which he already was. The marriage was not necessary. They had no chemistry. And we knew that Ginny had a crush on Harry in the beginning, but she grew out of it. And he never showed any indication of having anything other than sisterly feelings for her until Half-Blood Prince, and then it came out of the blue. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for all you Harry-Ginny shippers out there. I really, really am. I want to love this union, but I don't. There should have been more time leading up to it. Number 18. Harry and Dumbledore's bond wasn't what people thought it was. The books and movies always tried to show the strong bond between Harry and Dumbledore, but I never felt that at all. It was like they were trying to create the bond that Frodo and Gandalf had, but didn't quite succeed. The person Harry should have felt that bond with was Hagrid. Hagrid was always there for him, no matter what. I believe that the bond between Harry and Dumbledore is completely believable. Dumbledore is the one that taught him his true destiny and who he really was, and who always listened to him, even through the most unbelievable portions of the stories when even his friends were skeptical. Dumbledore always listened to him and worked with him. Now, affection-wise, I would say, yes, he had a stronger bond with Hagrid, but that doesn't lessen the bond that he had with Dumbledore. He was still there. 19. Hagrid did more for Harry than Sirius Black. Sirius got all of the credit for being Harry's only parental figure, when really it was Hagrid who was the only consistent parental figure in his life. The difference was Sirius acted similarly to how a stereotypical father figure would, which earned him all the credit. Meanwhile, Hagrid took on a more maternal role, which got him less credit. Also, Sirius was always very selfishly motivated and very rarely had Harry's best interests at heart. I do agree with this. I am not saying anything against Sirius as a character. I love him as a character. He's absolutely great. But he wasn't a proper parental figure for Harry. He wanted to be his buddy more than a dad. And he saw Harry being there as basically having James back. And that was made pretty clear on multiple occasions. If Harry didn't want to do something dangerous, because Sirius thought he should, he would be like, oh, there's not as much of your father in you as I thought there was, and stuff like that, like trying to goad him into doing it, which wasn't cool. Number 20. Harry should not have lived past the final battle. Harry Potter should have died in the end as well as Voldemort. Put it into an epic series. I don't agree with that. The prophecy clearly said that one cannot live while the other survives, indicating that one of them was going to live. Obviously, it should be Harry. Number 21. Voldemort actually had the saddest backstory. The saddest character in the whole series was Voldemort. After reading The Half-Blood Prince, his backstory broke my heart and I understood his hatred. His actions were inexcusable and heinous, but I think they were rooted in hurt and tragedy more than pure evil. He did have a sad backstory, but his backstory wasn't that different from Harry's. There were very, very strong parallels, and Harry turned out much different, obviously, so take that as you will. It's not an excuse. 22. The finale of the series was anticlimactic. The final face-off with Voldemort was both over the top with all the flying around as well as underwhelming with Voldy turning into grey cornflakes and blowing away. I expected the film's ending to be exciting, just like the last quarter of the book. It wasn't. And breaking the last book into 2 films was nothing but a cash grab. I'm going to answer this in 2 parts. The first part being, I agree that the ending in the movie was not as good as the ending of the book. It was a little too rushed, and it just didn't have the same effect. I really wanted to see the battle in the Great Hall like in the book. We didn't get that. That's fine. Like it still was a good ending. But I don't think that splitting it into 2 movies was a cash grab at all. It was a long book. It was the final book of a very popular, very nostalgic series. And had it been crammed into 1 movie, way too much would have had to been cut out. Answers wouldn't have been given. I believe it was necessary. However, it did become a trend with a lot of other series breaking the last book into 2 movies where it was not necessary. Like in The Hunger Games, Mockingjay was a crazy short book. There was no need for 2 films. 23. The movies are better than the books. I know they removed things that were in the books, changed some plots, blah, 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 but when you take the books on their own and the movies on their own, the movies are just better. No. I don't believe that at all, but I do like the movies. I do think that the Harry Potter series is one of the better movie adaptations out there. Like, most of the ones that I see, I just can't get on board with, but the majority of the Harry Potter series was set in stone and was very accurate, I felt, with the exception of Goblet of Fire and Order of the Phoenix. The rest of them I felt like were very solid adaptations. And I thought the casting was great for the most part, so I can't really agree with that. But that is all of the unpopular opinions in that article and my thoughts on them. If you agreed with my views or if you disagreed, leave comments in the section down below. If you like this video, please make sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!